OKC fam, I had the greatest opportunity probably of my entire life, and I got to sit down with Oklahoma City Mayor David Holt in the home of Mo Anderson, who happens to be the first CEO of Keller Williams International and my boss and mentor. And we got to have a conversation all about where Oklahoma City is going, and it was probably one of the best things that has ever happened to me. We recorded the whole conversation so you can hear the takeaways. I can't wait to hear what your favorite things were. I loved getting to hear his secret place where he takes all the celebrities when they come to visit OKC. It was a great conversation, and OKC is just getting started.
Thank you to Mo. I've been here before. I sat in that chair right there and met with you a few years ago here at the house. And obviously, she's somebody that we're very proud of here at OKC, all of your success. And I should point out, especially because you're realtors, we are in Oklahoma City right now. Don't let anybody tell you we're in Edmond.
That's right. That's where.
Not in Edmond. We're in Oklahoma City. Regrettably, when that fire happened, OKC came, not Edmond Fire Department. So,
and they were what?
So yes, but we are in OKC, and OKC is very proud of all of Mo's achievements, and that you continue to support our city. And thank you for having all of us here tonight. And thank you for your contribution to this first and last probably meeting of the Mayor Holt fan club. Again, I thank all of you for coming tonight, and thank you for all that you do. I often say this. It's often like maybe a Oakmar function, but I often point out that you are kind of like the first people oftentimes that new residents meet in Oklahoma City. So it's like we probably should spend a lot of time training you and the Uber drivers, right? Like on the city's story. So in that sense, what I'm here to do tonight is to provide some of that training. Hopefully, your first question is a good entry point. Like we want you to be pretty knowledgeable because you are deciding ultimately what people's first impressions are, where they live, what they're gonna try to experience first, and so I'm very grateful for the work you do. You actually play kind of a civic role in this community, and I'm certainly aware of that. So to your question, that's it. Well, first of all, I think, and I'll be candid here. Historically, there was a frustration, I think, in Oklahoma City leadership that realtors would just like pick up at the airport and then head north to Edmond, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't want you to spend any time with your client in Edmond. So, but I think like maybe that was more necessary 20 years ago when, maybe it wouldn't have been all that exciting to take them downtown or to the Plaza District, which, was just a bunch of abandoned buildings, or to the Paseo, which may have been a little more alive, but was still probably a lot of boarded up buildings. I mean, the things that you would do today obviously didn't exist. So hopefully now a realtor bringing a new client to Oklahoma City is going to spend most of their time, showing off this great American city that we have built. So yeah, I think it's a little different, like maybe for like somebody thinking about relocating here, like if they were just coming here for a vacation, I would say you got to go to like Oklahoma City National Memorial. I mean, that's a very like intense experience. That may not be what I would lead with, right? For like somebody looking to build a house, I would probably take somebody like that in your shoes. I would probably take them certainly downtown. I'd want them to stay, if they're spending the night, I'd want them to stay at the Omni or the National or the Fordson, and I would want them to experience our districts. Like I mentioned, the Plaza and Paseo. I'd want them to see that sort of cultural life that the city now has. I mean, obviously, I would hope they would come during Thunder season, maybe a regular season game. You don't have to break the bank to try to get them an NBA Finals ticket, but get them here when they can experience that, because that's become such a cultural touchstone for the city. And obviously, as you now know, we do have a lot of inner city neighborhoods that maybe were not considered as the same kind of option 20 years ago that they would be today. And so I certainly hope that it's not just suburban new construction, though we need all of it, and we need oftentimes new housing stock that we'll need in this city is going to be built on the fringes. Nonetheless, we need density too, and we need people, really believing in and investing in our inner city neighborhood. But those have become, as you know, some of our hottest areas. Houses that used to be $80,000 10 years ago are now $500,000, or their lots are, as people rebuild some of these neighborhoods. And obviously the food scene, which I think you mentioned in your question is worth touching upon, has become such a almost surprising new aspect of life in Oklahoma City. So I think I would just pick, the list of James Beard Award winners and nominees over the last 5 years. Like, None Such is currently out for a national Best Restaurant Award. Of course, Chef Andrew Black just won, the Chef Award a couple years ago. So taking them there, if you want, like maybe kind of more of like a regional flavor, Florence's just won about 3 years ago a special James Beard Award. So there's a lot of options along those lines, and also in surprising ways, because obviously some people might think, well, it's just steaks and burgers, but they can come here and experience the kind of tasting menu like you have at None Such, or they can have a great pho scene that we have, with our, built around our thriving Vietnamese community. So I think most of all, what we learn in every aspect of OKC, for those who bring visitors here, people who might be recruiting new talent or whatever, if we could just get them here. I used to joke, I say this in audiences like this, I'll say we always benefited from people's low expectations. So, if we could just get them here, they're blown away, right? Like, they were like, if they were reticent to come because they weren't 100% sure we had plumbing, right? But then they come here and they're like, oh, like you have this unique combination. And this is really something I want you to take away from this, especially as a realtor. Oklahoma City now offers, after 30 years of investment, we now offer quality of life that is really like in terms of the cultural and professional sports and food options that you would expect to have in a big city. Like, it is on par with any great American city, but it is combined with a ease of living and a cost of living that feels like a much smaller place. That's like a magical combination, right? You can't get those two things usually. Like, you can eat at all the restaurants you want to in New York City, but you're going to spend like an hour, going anywhere, and you're going to obviously spend an arm and a leg to live there. You can go live in McAlester, Oklahoma, and you're not going to be in any traffic, and and your rent's not going to be very high, but you're going to be eating at Chili's if you like it, So it's like, where do you get those two things together, affordability and ease of living, and all of the amenities of a great American city? And that actually, if you start to think, well, let me look at like the top 50 cities and see, like, it's a pretty short list. We may be the only one, and sometimes you offer that, and so many people start to take you up on it that you start to lose the ease of living and the cost of living advantages. And there's not much you can do about that. I mean, you do your best. But what I would say is enjoy this sweet spot that we're in for the next decade or so. And maybe there's a point where, we get kind of, as we grow as big as Austin or other cities that maybe have at one time offered that same unique combination. But for now, it's still not that much traffic. I mean, some people might dispute that, but they need to get out more. So still not that much traffic. Costs are still relatively low. And I say relatively because, you look at something like Key to Home. It's always worth remembering that you can live in a place that has a lower cost of living and a lower housing cost than almost anywhere else, any other large cities, and still not be affordable enough for everybody, right? So you see, those two things can coexist, right? We can both say out there to the nation, hey, come move to Oklahoma City, our cost of living is really low and our housing costs are really low, and still understand that we still have some work to do back home to make sure that everybody can be housed, right? So, I mean, those things are not in opposition. But anyways, I think Oklahoma City obviously is in a very unique time in its history. And what's happening this week is sort of one of those moments that sort of crystallizes that. But obviously, this has been happening now for many years and has much more potential yet to come.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, this is a big week for Oklahoma.
I know. We scheduled this months ago. I think I
would have known.
Like, NBA finals have actually been scheduled for like 9 months. If you went online, you could have found out what all the games were. I don't know that I was quite prepared to really believe this is going to happen to such an extent that I would not schedule anything. Next year, maybe I'll.
Yeah. Did you guys all see the video with the other mayor that you sent today?
Right.
We were excited about that. We have a lot of questions, so I'm going to pick the most important ones that I think. This is just a fun one. What's something about your job as mayor that surprised you in a good way or maybe in a weird way?
Well, so I was the youngest mayor in a century, but I was also like the first Oklahoma City mayor to have worked in the office. I had Bailey's job for 5 years. And I'm also one of the few mayors, not the only one, but one of the few mayors to have also already been in elective office. So I was in the state senate for 8 years. So surprisingly, despite being so young, for this job, I was 39 or 40 when I was elected. I actually probably entered office as the most experienced and prepared person we'd ever elected as mayor of Oklahoma City, just because that was the life I had chosen. If you had gathered scientists to create a future Oklahoma City mayor, you would not have done anything different than what I did with my 20 years leading up to that. So I say all that to say that if I had a lot of surprises, I was not doing this right, but I do think, I'll say this, and maybe tonight's a great illustration of it, the total loss of anonymity, right? This is a fascinating thing that you're not, you get into this for all these like reasons that you get, a personal emotional reward from service and, making the city better and all of or maybe you're driven by policy. I don't know, maybe we live in kind of a weird political time, but normally I would not have told you that most people get into politics just to be famous, But certainly that's what comes when you serve in a job like this. A reaction to what did I do before this fairly well captures my 8 years in the Oklahoma State Senate, I think. I'm not sure my next door neighbor knew I was in the Senate. And, if they had been told, I guess they would have just shrugged and said, well, I guess everybody's got to have a job. But it means nothing to nobody, especially in an urban area. But your mayor, like, everybody kind of knows who the mayor is. And we've had, it's been, obviously a consequential 7 years that I've been serving highs and lows, challenges and triumphs. So all of that sort of does elevate you. But I guess what I'd say is, should any of you ever be as famous as I am, you will know what I really mean. It is so weird when you're like shopping or you're walking down the street and like everybody calls you by your name. Like it's like you're in the Truman Show or something. Or I guess in this case, often there's title, but whatever the case, they're like, hello, Mayor. Here you go, Mayor. Oh, here's your coffee, Mayor. You're like, it's weird. Like, you don't realize how much you think of yourself as just sort of invisible in life and maybe to some extent how much you prize that, and so that's a surprising and weird thing that I probably had not thought a lot about. It's part of like what a politician, part of winning office is getting name ID. You want that recognition because it just makes your victory go better, but it is funny when you actually achieve what you had been working towards, and it is interesting to be as famous as anybody else in the world within 620 square mile area. Very localized scam. Right? Like I'm as famous as George Clooney right here.
But you're also doing kid drop.
Right, stars, they're just like
they're just like what do you think will define the next chapter of OKC's growth story?
So again, like this week is a week that I think people are very, especially those who've lived here a long time, are very sort of thoughtful about how far we've come. Again, it on the one hand, it's just a basketball achievement. Like all we've accomplished is we've somehow people who lived in our city were able to gather some of the best basketball players together. But in a community like this, obviously, it just means so much more. And it definitely kind of becomes a prison through which we view these last 30 years since the passage of maps, since the bombing. And so I say all that to say that, I mean, even 10 years ago, people were saying, gosh, we've come so far. Like, it's hard. I can't imagine we could go any farther, you know? And think about, we made the NBA Finals in 2012. And we'd only had a team for 4 years, so I think that we were a little spoiled, and like maybe now we appreciate it more. But there was no doubt a similar sense of arrival when we made the NBA Finals in 2012. Like, what a statement this makes about our city's growth. And yet, in the Western Conference Finals, if you watch the games on TV, you know, they had this drone shot. It was really amazing. It went across Scissortail Park and under the bridge there, and then kind of emerged up, and you saw the convention center, and you saw Devon Tower, and you saw the BOK thing, you know, you saw the whole skyline. And here's the crazy thing. When we were in the NBA Finals last time in 2012, virtually nothing in that image existed, right? Like, Devon Tower was under construction, but the convention center did not exist, the Omni did not exist, Scissortail Park did not exist, BOK Tower did not exist. You know, First National hadn't been renovated, Bank First Tower hadn't been renovated. I mean, like, everything in there either didn't exist, was under construction, or was in a state of disrepair. And so just in the 13 years since the last visit to the NBA Finals, the city has grown so much. So every time you sit back and you say, we have arrived, and I can't imagine that we could do anything more than we have, I really think you have to check yourself and say, you know, this could be just the prelude, you know, to another chapter. And I would say that I think, yeah, that really we've only just now in the last few years finally arrived at a point where I would say a national and international, the national and international scene really is taking notice of us and is really paying attention, and and you're seeing just a higher level of person and entity willing to invest in the city, willing to work in the city, willing to, you know, create jobs and do business here. I mean, as a mayor, you know, I obviously get a high level of exposure to what people think of us around the country and around the world. And I just certainly feel like it's only been recently that people really take us seriously. And so if that's only just now finally happening, like, that's what the next 20 years will be this, I think, influx of people and investment that will probably make the last 20 years seem pedestrian in comparison. As far as we've come, we've only just now really reached that point where the world's taking notice. And that's why moments like what's happening this week are so such great opportunities for us. And I've been saying this a lot in interviews for the last 48 hours, you know, is like the doors that are being opened for us through the exposure of being in the NBA Finals will present opportunities that we'll be capitalizing on for years to come. You know, that it just, and if you win the championship, it just changes the way that people see you and the way you see yourselves. I mean, it may be superficial, and if you're not really a sports fan, it's always hard to really accept that this is how things work, but it nevertheless is the reality. That we'll just have a higher level of credibility moving forward, having made it this far, and then certainly if we were to win the title. So it'll start every conversation that I'll have about Oklahoma City, I'm sure, for like the next 5 years, you know, and that will open a lot of doors for us, and you just don't know what that means. But you know, just these last few years to see the outside investment coming in, to meet people, this has kind of been the craziest phenomenon, and you certainly see it as realtors. How it used to be 30 years ago, right? The great tragedy of the city was always everybody of any kind of wherewithal moved away, you know? And then there was this achievement that some people were finally staying, you know, like they were graduating from college and they wouldn't move away. And then like the next level of achievement was we were starting to get, they were called boomerangs, you know, we were starting to get people that had abandoned us in the 80s and 90s, but they were 20 years later, they were realizing Oklahoma City had changed and they were willing to come back. The last 5 years, what I've seen is this whole new phenomenon that really is still surreal to me. People moving here that had no connection. right? They didn't grow up here. They don't have family here. They just had an opportunity, or they just kind of almost found out about us and were hooked, and that you're starting to see more and more of that. And that, again, I think is what you'll see in the next 10 to 20 years is that influx of people. Now, are there costs to that? Yeah. More traffic, more pressure on infrastructure, and more demand for housing and more demand for everything that does inevitably drive prices up. But what I always say to that is there is no way to have a city that people want to live in and not have people move to it. You can't build a wall around your city. So we tried this experiment both ways. In the 1980s, we tried having a city that nobody wanted to move to. And it turns out we didn't want to live there either. And so the other alternative is to have a city that is going to attract people. And it turns out we like that too. So we'll just be glad that you got in early. But other people are going to move here. So I've always viewed population growth, despite the challenges that it can present, as clearly the ultimate validator that your city is doing something right. And so I celebrate population growth. And certainly we have had it. When I was born, we were the 37th largest city in the United States, and now we're the 20th largest city. So it's unquestionable, the change in growth that we've seen in these 4 decades.
Yeah. It's kind of...
You have a lot more questions. As a politician, I apologize in advance that I don't give 30-second answers.
What kind of industries or businesses would you love to see that you think would support our infrastructure, help us continue growing, and how can we help support that if we are having the relocating buy-ins or...
Yeah, well, one of the things, obviously one of the big lessons out of the 80s was diversification of our economy. We were highly reliant on oil and gas, and though we still receive a lot of benefit from that. I mean, we wouldn't have the thunder if not for the oil and gas industry. Most of the major owners initially were in oil and gas and had been kind of exiting a boom time that allowed them to have the resources to buy the team. So we still appreciate it, but we can't appreciate it too much. We can't be overly reliant on one industry, because especially an industry that has fluctuations in prices. So we've always tried to diversify. And so to some extent, my answer to your question is everything, just everything but oil and gas. You could find any kind of diverse industry and business. We want to see more of that in OKC, but certainly we've been able to build a lot around aviation. Being the home of Tinker Air Force Base has a lot of spinoff for us. We have seen dramatic growth in the visitor economy. I mean, when you see things like Okana and all the great attractions that we now have, we're definitely receiving both conventions. So the convention center also has made possible, a higher level of convention than we'd ever been able to host before. So we get convention business, but we also are getting, at least regionally, visitors who come for a long weekend. And that's been a significant contributor to our economy. And then you see crazy things like the film industry, you never would have expected to happen here. But I think probably the thing that could have the biggest impact, that is a big part of a lot of major city economies, is just anything in tech and bio. And we were really punching below our weight, even for a city our size, in those industries for a very long time. But you're seeing people certainly working at that. The Innovation District, which you may also know as 16 other names, Health Sciences Center, or, just OU, or whatever you want to call it. But community and the leadership has tried to rally around the idea that everything immediately northeast of downtown on the other side of 235 is the Innovation District. And so we've invested in that through Maps 4 and some of the placemaking around that. But you're also seeing the private sector respond. And so I think it's a great story when you see things like Echo. So that's a company with its roots in oil and gas, but is now investing in bio. And it literally has a bio pharmaceutical manufacturing facility in its building in downtown Oklahoma City. There's people manufacturing cutting edge drugs right there, adjacent to Kerr Park, right in downtown OKC. We obviously just need a lot more of that, and we can all contribute to it in all the different ways that we do, with economic incentives and placemaking in the Innovation District. And also, ultimately, the greatest key for us, obviously, as a city, has been our very intentional strategy to invest in our quality of life. Because in Indianapolis, being our opponent in the NBA Finals has been a little poetic, and I've done a lot of interviews about that this week, because it was our recognition in 1991 when we lost a huge economic development opportunity to Indianapolis, a 6,000 job United Airlines maintenance facility, that our city leadership recognized that maybe the greatest challenge we had was just that it was not fun to live here. And so when I was referencing earlier, like that unique combination, and half of that combination is having just a great quality of life, great culture in restaurants and neighborhoods and thunder and all those things. That was a major lesson that we took out of the early 90s, was that our downtown was dead. I mean, there was one hotel in downtown Oklahoma City. It is really hard if you're not old enough to have lived here in the 80s and 90s to even really kind of visualize what it's like to imagine maybe go to downtown now at 3 a.m. Maybe that's what it would, and just imagine that the sun was up and then think, okay, all the streets are empty. There's no people, there's no cars parked, there's no restaurants open. Like, that's what Oklahoma City was until, the 2000 or so. Indianapolis beat us out, got that thing in 1991. It actually ended up not being such a great deal for them, but that was irrelevant, because the lesson was that we had to emulate cities like that. And our mayor, Ron Norick, at the time, went to Indianapolis in 1991 after the defeat, and he saw a vibrant downtown, and he saw a city with 2 major league professional sports teams. Indianapolis doesn't have oceans or mountains, so what is their advantage? And they had just been able to achieve things we hadn't at that point, which was a vibrant downtown and professional sports. And so we spent, 30 years emulating that. That is the biggest key to all the diversification and industry growth that we see, is to have a city that people want to live in. Because it turns out, I think the modern paradigm is that the jobs sort of follow the people as opposed to the other way around. And so where the people want to live is where the people want to live. And the jobs tend to gravitate. So we're seeing that, though. Oklahoma City is obviously in an economically really strong position. Literally this month, we have the lowest unemployment in the United States. So, yeah.
So agreeing. You referenced sports, and that is many people's question.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna.
It's hard not to right now.
Two-part question. One, do you think OKC could ever support an NFL team? And then the other sports related is, how about the Major League Soccer club that is coming? Can you speak to either of those?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this is a very popular topic in my 7 years as mayor. People love sports. Okay, so here's a stark reality. We're the 20th largest city. So that's how many people live in your city limit. And so when I go to mayor's conferences, there's only 19 mayors who have more constituents than me, because you're not a mayor of your suburbs, right? And that's cool. Having said that, when you throw in the suburbs and you begin to define communities as metropolitan statistical areas, as the census does, MSAs, we fall a little farther down the list. We need Edmond and Norman to pick it up, because we are 42nd largest market. Okay, so what does that matter? Well, to mayors, it only matters who lives in your city, but to the NBA or the NFL or to Boeing or, whoever, like, they're looking at your whole community. They're looking at the MSA. They're looking at, because the city limits don't matter to them. They're just looking at how many people are within driving distance of this opportunity. And so in each sports league, this is just the way it's kind of worked out over time. There's about 30 teams. There's 30 NBA teams. There's 32 NFL teams. There's 30, I think, MLB teams. So Rick, if the free market decided where the teams would be, there would never be a team in the 42nd largest market. There's other forces that work on this. Obviously, sometimes it's just opportunistic. Sometimes it's about venues. Sometimes it's about the ownership group. I mean, so there's opportunities, as we have obviously proven, to occasionally see a team fall below the 30 line and end up in a market our size. It's probably worth noting, there is no team in the NFL, MLB, or NBA below the 50th market except for Green Bay, which is like a historical anomaly because they had the team since the beginning of the NFL. And that's a quirky little thing. And it's it's beloved in sports that Green Bay, the city of like 150,000 people or whatever, has has an NFL team. But other than that, it always gravitates towards the largest market. So I say all this to say that, between 40 and 50, there's like maybe a couple cities that have more than one team. And so it's challenging because, obviously these teams are hyper competitive for revenues. It's not actually a great business proposition to own a team on a day-to-day basis. Many of the owners maybe are able to ultimately cash out when they sell, and the valuations of the teams often dramatically increase over time. But it is kind of like the bigger sucker theory, it really often loses money on a day-to-day basis. And so most owners will only make their money when they sell. So they're not, as a result, super excited about being in a market this size if they have other opportunities to be in larger markets where just because of scale, just because of more human beings, they can make more money. They just sell more tickets. The TV ratings will be higher, so their local TV deals will be better. And so it's really hard to have a professional sports team in a place like Oklahoma City when the competition is places like LA and New York. Like our Thunder and their ownership are not competing in the junior version of the NBA. Like they have to stand toe to toe and somehow have the revenues to pay the players at the same degree that the LA Clippers and the New York Knicks do if they want to compete. And it's not like, that there's like some extra revenue that's given to the small teams. I mean, that might be fair and that might create more parity, but it doesn't really work that way. And of course the players aren't going to take less, they're ultimately the ones who kind of have the most leverage in all of this. And so as an aside, when people often say to me oh, the tickets should be cheaper, or we're building the arena, we should get free tickets, or or I got to pay $20 a month to watch the games and all this. And I'm like, that's all fine. I get why you would say that, but you got to understand, the less you pay and the less money the team has, the less likely they're going to pay Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And they use all that money to pay those players. And so you might get free games, but you're not going to want to watch them. And he's like, the team's terrible because they don't have this money to pay their players. So it's a weird thing. It's very hyper competitive, which is a long way of saying that, the prospects of us having another team are probably pretty remote in the foreseeable future because other owners in the NFL or the MLB or even the NHL are just going to look at this market as just not big enough to have enough people and corporate presence to sustain a second team. That's not even to speak to the fact that in a market this size, private sector actors don't build arenas and stadiums, which is why we had this conversation in 2023 about how Oklahoma City, we want these nice things, we're going to have to pay for them because nobody else is going to. And people would say, it's not fair, or they should do it. I'm like, I don't care what's fair or what they should do. All that I have to operate within as a mayor is reality, and they're not going to do it. So, because no one's ever done it in a community like this. There's 18 larger metropolitan statistical areas in the United States that don't have an NBA team. And some of them already have billion-dollar stadiums, arenas, waiting for a team. So we had to do that. Likewise, we would have to build an NFL stadium. We would have to build an MLB stadium. And those are, at this point, multi-billion-dollar expenditures. I don't think, as the guy who would have to go run that tax campaign, I don't have a high level of confidence that that's ultimately what people in Oklahoma City want to do. They often say we want those teams, but they maybe haven't thought through what all is entailed in that. I do think, however, that soccer is interesting and different. So MLS is currently viewed as the highest level of soccer in the United States. Soccer, like basketball, these are really the two sports that are truly global. Differentiate from all others. I mean, even baseball and football are really only just played in America and maybe a few other countries. So soccer and basketball are the true international sports. MLS is barely a top 10 league internationally, but it's in the United States. So it's eventually you've always kind of felt like they can keep climbing up, and they certainly have a vision for that. So I think what we as a community have tried to do it's still like a lower barrier to entry to have an MLS team in terms of the facilities. It maybe costs today $250 million or $500 million instead of $2 or $3 billion to have an MLS stadium. And certainly ownership also is not as expensive. So I, as mayor, have sort of had a side project in a sense of keeping us in the game of soccer. And right now we have a USL team, which is kind of viewed as the second tier of American soccer. But, you know, USL has designs on competing with MLS. There's also a pretty exciting new women's league, the NWSL, which our USL owners are talking about pursuing. So all of this lends itself, in my view, to at least trying to stay in the game. And so that's why MAPS 4 includes a stadium. It's a very modest stadium. It started at $40 million budget. Then it got to 70 through some TIF funding. And now we're looking at potentially doing some more through a future bond issue. So we could get it to like maybe $120 or $130 million, which sounds like a lot of money to you and me, but is still like, you know, probably barely above the budget of a Texas high school football stadium. So, but it is like in the neighborhood of a decent minor league soccer stadium in the United States. So I think that's what we're trying to do is like stay in the game, have a good minor league team that's successful, that could kind of keep us, you know, in the mix should we ever get an opportunity at MLS. Or maybe we'll get lucky and USL will realize their aspirations and actually topple the MLS as sort of the top soccer league and we'll already be in the game. But if not, you know, I think we've always thought that a few years from now, we get the stadium open, we're successful with USL, that we might end up having a conversation with MLS about expansion or about a relocation. And I think that really is always, just through a process of elimination, has always been viewed by me as our most likely second team. It still feels like a decade away. But when you think about the stadium costs for NFL and MLB, it's just kind of not realistic. Plus, also, the Dallas Cowboys are never going to let us have an NFL team. Realistically, they would stand in the way of that.
Right. Sounds good.
I think we should talk a little bit about affordable housing, and we actually should wrap up, so maybe make it short.
Yeah, sure. Good luck with that.
They don't have to be the last.
Thinking about leaving the fan club?
There's a strategy.
Talk you to death.
I'm going to security. I don't put in that.
Okay, affordable housing initiative. Yes.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I alluded to it earlier. All right. Oh, here you you know, our housing costs are increasing. So for all the right reasons, but it inevitably demand and population growth, you know, put pressure on your housing costs. And obviously you guys see it, you know, it's got its, probably for each of you, it really has pros and cons. You know, we as a market that was historically viewed as affordable really didn't think about, talk about, or invest in that issue at all until a few years ago. Our most recent city bond issue had $10 million in it to incentivize affordable housing. So that was passed in 2017. So like, what that means is a private developer could come to us and say, I'm building these apartments downtown OKC, but if like you would give us $1 million from this $10 million fund, we would promise to charge, you know, less in rent to people in certain income levels. And so we've been successful with that. And it's done so well that we're talking about another bond issue to make investments in our core infrastructure later this year. And it looks like it will certainly include some more of that type of incentive funding, and probably to a much greater degree, maybe like $50 million. And then also through MAPS 4, we had $50+ million for what we call truly affordable housing, which is really almost housing for people that are almost the verge of homelessness. So this is even really more at a lower socioeconomic level, but nonetheless important and necessary. That's kind of where we've been operating. You know, there's other thoughts in terms of policies you can pursue. Obviously, Oakmar's all over this. They just recently came to us at the council and got us to approve, you know, an expansion of the ability for homeowners in Oklahoma City to build accessory dwelling units on their property, ADUs. We'll see if that moves the needle. But there's, you know, certainly some efforts to try to streamline regulation or allow people to do things that maybe they weren't allowed to do by right before with their property, all of which to just try to create more housing. I think we're just at the very beginning now as a community. When you look at other cities, they've probably been at this for a lot longer. Because we had been perceiving ourselves for so long as an affordable housing market, we just weren't really prioritizing the conversation. So we're really just kind of in the first few years. And there's certainly a lot of things that have been tried out there. So it's a lot of, as they often say, cities and states are the laboratories of democracy. So, I mean, there's like a lot of great examples for us to see what works and doesn't work. And I think we have plans that we've adopted now. I mean, there's very thoughtful work being done at City Hall. We just got to, invest in it as well. And we'll have another opportunity to do that later this year with the bond issue. I'd probably be remiss if I didn't say, we'll have a big bond issue vote later this year in Oklahoma City. Realtors in Oklahoma City have always been very supportive of our bond issues. These are, to kind of contrast them with things like MAPS or the Arena, I mean, these are like very meat and potatoes initiatives. This is like over half of it will just be for street resurfacing. It's core infrastructure, but it's still a tax vote. And you still got to come out and vote for it. And they usually pass pretty easily, but but you can't take anything for granted. I mean, listen, Edmond just failed a bond issue for core infrastructure. I do not know how they're going to fix their stuff up there. So you can't assume that everybody thinks these are great ideas, even if the logic is powerful to me. So we have passed them in Oklahoma City fairly well the last half century. We had one in 2000, 2007, 2017, and it looks like we'll have one a little later this year. And certainly encourage you to stay engaged in it and help explain to people. It will not increase their property taxes, but that is what it is funded through, is through property taxes. It'll just keep the rate the same as it is. And it pays for like the core infrastructure, which is uniquely challenging in a city of 620 square miles, one of the 5 largest cities in the United States by land mass.
Okay. Most important last question. When the Thunder win the NBA championship, or take that into existence, where's the parade going to be, and are you leading it, or will you be walking on foot?
You wanted to have a short answer. I cannot comment on that. Can't comment on that topic. Yeah.
That's where that sold.
What is some other stuff? Sure. Yeah.
Most of that. But honestly, you kind of did.
Okay. Good. Well, I just want people to does anybody have something that's that they just can't live without asking me?
I just want to know, it's Friday night, you and your wife get a date night. Where are you going to dinner?
Great question. We are historically, our favorite place for the whole family has been Rococo. And we've always gone there for birthdays and stuff. My wife and I, my wife's in Philly. We met at George Washington University. We moved back here from DC in 2004, and we moved a mile from Rococo, and that's when they opened. And so it's just always felt like, a special bond with them, and Bruce Reinhardt's the owner and all that. But they just do a great job, and it really is like the best crab cake in the world, which you wouldn't expect in OKC, right? So that's probably our special place. But, we already touched upon a few of the amazing restaurants. You could go on and on and on. I mean, so many different styles and options. I this is going to be a great answer. When I took Leonardo DiCaprio to and Martha Stewart to dinner, we went to Cheevers. So that's a good spot.
You got Cheevers.
I think she liked it up by it. Yeah, I suppose as a man, you're like, what do you think? I don't know if I was getting your answer from either than that I was looking for, but
it's the best place in ever got.
Yeah, but I think it worked.
Good.
So good. But Cheevers is great. I think there's a reason I would choose that. It's got a unique menu, but a lot of different options, and very predictable, predictably good, and also a cool kind of ambiance, in an old house or something. Frida's is really we'll get there. Yeah, I'll get there now. Yeah, it's pretty. See, this is good.
Okay, you mentioned Indianapolis. What other cities are you looking at? And we're looking at, I know we're our own brand.
Yeah, sure.
What other cities are you looking at for English?
Well, I think in the last 20 years, people who live this life and are in kind of urban growth circles, right? Obviously the for a while, maybe this was a little more established now, but I would say 20 years ago, everybody wanted to be Charlotte. And then like 10 years ago, everybody wanted to be Austin and Nashville. And I'd say those are still kind of like the cities that come to mind. Interestingly, when I first kind of got into this and I had Bailey's job, everyone wanted to be Portland. Now nobody wants to be Portland.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you gotta ride the waves, I guess. So Portland's like a failed state now. So, but Austin and Nashville and I'll get people who come here and that's like a thing they'll say a lot. Oh, this feels like Austin 20 years ago, you know? So then, again, good and bad with that. I mean, I'm generally pro-growth and I'm going to say it's good, but obviously there's plenty of people in Austin who hate the traffic and the cost of living, right? But it used to offer what we do, which is sort of the lower cost and yet all the great amenities of a city. So I think that's kind of where we have historically in recent years looked at as our aspirational peers. But I really do think if it's not already happened, and things like the NBA championship are what sort of are tipping points, we're that city now. That's it. I think like in the circles of people who pay attention to such things, there's always sort of like an it city. And like, I feel like we're about to be that if we're not already. And obviously amazing. Imagine somebody in Omaha 10 years from now saying, you know what, this feels like Oklahoma City did 20 years. That's what we want, I guess.
So
You can get there. What else? Any other questions? I've commandeered the
Dr. Bob.
yes, any other business in front of the fan club, this meeting of the Mayor Holt fan club.
Just boring. So you successfully moved Katy Perry to town. Like, who's your next, like, musical crunch that you're trying to get to?
Ailey knows I am like actively in a pursuit of the last 24 hours. But I also feel like I can't tell you. I'm freaking.
And it may not. The Lord won't know. It's announced.
Honestly, I'm not sure. I think it would play better. I think it would play better in a slightly older room.
You saw the construction.
No, that was like an opportunistic thing. I had a mutual friend, and so I've been around her a few times, and she hadn't played here. And I did the research. I went to Polestar, and I was top 75 artists, and she was the only one of very few that in the all-time grossing concert artist that had never been here. So I just really was intent on that and personally worked on that to get her here, and she was very gracious about it. And I ended up getting a situation about 9 months ago where she personally told me, she broke the news to me, I'm coming to Oklahoma City. I've chosen you.
Fun.
So yeah, that was a fun experience to get her here. It is funny, pursuit of concerts is a part of quality of life. You want a local cool bar scene, club scene and all that. That's great. You need that. But do it. Listen, people also want to see Taylor Swift, they want to see Katy Perry. They want to see these big artists. And so that actually, as it turns out, doesn't happen naturally. I mean, you need a good arena. We talked about that 2 years ago, because the artist needs to make money. This is not a hobby for them. Actually, it's a business. So you need an arena that is lucrative for them. Obviously, you need a big market to begin with. There's only so much we could do about that, but we've grown in more and more. But we were the smallest market that Katy Perry went to on this tour in America. And then as it turns out, you do need a little bit of advocacy and lobbying, sometimes, especially because it's they could go to Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Wichita, Little Rock. To them, sometimes as they're literally crafting a circuit and driving trucks around the country, they could kind of go to any of those markets, New York's always going to get everybody. Dallas is always going to get everybody. But we do have to kind of lobby. And we have actually a management company. It's a national company called ASM that manages our arena. And there's a really talented guy there who's the GM named Chris Simrow. And he travels around the country. When artists come, he creates this whole a fun world down there. So for Katy, he painted all the walls down in the Paycom Center down in the backstage area. We're never would ever go. They'd say Camp Katy, and And he brought in like sloths, like literal sloths, and like and the animals and stuff, like so that Katie and the crew and could like have all that fun, and because it leaves an impression with the artists and their management, and like they talk and again, like when it's not totally a business decision and it's like kind of a coin flip, that stuff helps, like, well, we could go to Oklahoma City or Tulsa. It seems like it's about the same on a business side, and somebody says, well, Chris works at OKC. He's so nice, and he takes care, he gives his back rubs, and when we show up there, he's got a barber. I mean, like, all these things that he does down there, it makes a difference. So it's funny, and so sometimes the mayor gets involved. There's a lot of weird aspects to this job that you'll have to read in the memoirs. Send the Mayor Holt book club.
Book club will be way better.
All right, I'll let you end it now.
Well, it will be the time. Mo has given us the signal. It's time for us to wrap. Thank you again, Mayor Holt.